Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. The hum of my computer fan was a comforting drone in the quiet of my apartment. Outside, the city was awash of muted lights and distant sirens, but here, in the world of Heartwire, I was busy bee, a force to be reckoned with. My real name's Adriana, and in reality I'm not exactly a social butterfly. Shy, awkward, the kind of person who blends into the background. But online, behind the screen, I could be anyone. And in Heartwire, I chose to be Busy Bee. The open-world structure of the game was intoxicating. I could build my own little corner of this digital universe, go on quests, level up my character, and most importantly, connect with other people. It was my escape, my sanctuary. That's where I met him. Red Shock. He was a skilled player, always ready with a helpful tip or a witty comment. Our interactions started casually enough. We'd team up for quests, explore new areas of the game, and just chat about everything and nothing. He knew the ins and outs of Heartwire, and I quickly came to rely on his advice. He was charismatic, funny, and, he seemed to get me. It was Red Shock who encouraged me to start streaming. "You're a great player, Busy Bee," he'd said. "You should share your adventures with the world." I'd hesitated at first. The idea of putting myself out there, even behind a screen, was daunting. But Red Shock was persuasive. He helped me set up my Twitch account, showed me the ropes, and even promoted my channel within the Heartwire community. Slowly but surely, my channel started to grow. I wasn't a superstar streamer by any means, usually hovering around 20 to 50 viewers, but it was enough. It was validation, a sense of belonging I'd never really experienced before. And Red Shock was always there, in the chat, offering encouragement, making jokes, just being Red Shock. Then, the messages started. They were subtle at first, easy to dismiss. During one stream, I was wearing my favorite hoodie, a faded, oversized thing I only wore at home. No one had ever seen me in it outside of my apartment. Yet, a message popped up in the chat. "Love that hoodie, Busy Bee." It was Red Shock. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. How could he know? I definitely hadn't mentioned it on stream. Had I? My mind raced, trying to remember every word I'd uttered during the broadcast. Maybe I'd mentioned it offhand? Maybe someone had seen a picture of me wearing it somewhere and mentioned it in the chat? I couldn't be sure. I brushed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. It was probably just a coincidence. Or maybe he was just being observant. Compliments weren't exactly unusual in the chat. But then, there were other things. Little comments, references to things I'd never shared online. He mentioned how much I hated mornings, something I'd only ever complained about to myself. He made a joke about my messy desk, even though my webcam's view never showed my desk. Each message was a tiny prick of unease, a seed of doubt planted in my mind. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself I was overreacting. But the feeling was growing, a cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. It was like a glitch in the system, a tiny error in the code that was slowly unraveling my sense of security. Something wasn't right, and deep down, I knew it. That cold knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen. I tried to shake off the unsettling feeling, telling myself I was being ridiculous. Red Shock was my friend, wasn't he? He wouldn't do anything weird. But the little comments, the subtle hints, they were starting to add up. It felt like he was peering into my life, not just my game. His influence started to creep into other areas too. He began offering unsolicited advice on my personal life, cloaked in concern. "You should be careful about those late-night streams, Busy Bee," he'd message me privately. Not everyone online is trustworthy. It was like he was watching me, even when I wasn't streaming. The way he phrased it, it wasn't just about general online safety. It was personal. A shiver ran down my spine. I tried to deflect, telling him I knew how to be safe online. But he persisted, his messages becoming more frequent, more intrusive. He'd ask me about my day, my plans, things I'd never mentioned to him. It was like he was trying to build a profile of me, piece by piece. Then, the incident on the street. I was walking home from the library, lost in my own thoughts, when I caught a glimpse of someone in my peripheral vision. A figure standing across the street, partially hidden in the shadows. I didn't get a good look at them. but the feeling of being watched was intense, almost physical. My heart started to pound in my chest. I quickened my pace, glancing back nervously. The figure was gone. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was being paranoid. But the feeling lingered, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. That night, I logged into Heartwire, seeking the familiar comfort of the game. Red Shock was already online. He messaged me almost immediately. "I saw you today," he wrote. My blood ran cold. "You look different in person." My fingers trembled as I typed a reply. "What are you talking about?" He responded with a description of what I was wearing, the same clothes I'd been wearing on the street. The accuracy was chilling. There was no way he could have known unless he'd been there, watching me. I was terrified, on the verge of logging off and shutting down my computer entirely. But Red Shock quickly backpedaled. "Oh, come on, Busy Bee," he said, adding a laughing emoji. "Don't be so dramatic. We live in the same city, remember? You must have mentioned it in passing sometime." He was gaslighting me, trying to make me doubt my own memory, and the worst part was, it almost worked. I knew I'd never told him where I lived. I was always careful about that. But his words planted a seed of doubt. Had I mentioned it? Could I have forgotten? He was so casual, so nonchalant, it made me question my own sanity. I wanted to end the conversation, to escape the suffocating feeling of being observed. But he kept talking, smoothly changing the subject, acting like nothing had happened. He talked about the game, about our next quest, about anything to distract me. And I, weak and confused, let him. I stayed online, trapped in his web of words, the feeling of dread slowly solidifying into something much, much worse. The unease lingered, a constant hum beneath the surface of my daily life. Even in the vibrant world of Heartwire, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Red Shock's words echoed in my mind. "We live in the same city, remember?" He'd planted that seed of doubt, and it was growing, twisting around my thoughts. I tried to focus on the game, on the quests and challenges, but Red Shock was always there, a constant presence in my peripheral vision. He'd message me constantly, asking about my day, commenting on things I'd done, things he couldn't possibly know unless he was watching me. Then, the profile picture incident. I logged into Heartwire one morning, ready to start my stream, and something was wrong. My profile picture, the one I'd carefully chosen for my Busy Bee persona, was gone. In its place was a photo from my Instagram, a candid shot, taken by a friend at a party, a picture I'd never posted online. It was just a silly snapshot, me laughing with my friends, but it felt like a violation. Like someone had reached into my private life and stolen a piece of it. My heart pounded in my chest. I immediately messaged Red Shock. "What the hell is this?" I typed, my fingers shaking. "Why is my Instagram photo on my Heartwire profile?" He responded quickly, feigning surprise. "Whoa, that's weird, Busy Bee. Someone must have hacked your account." He then added, almost casually, "You know, your account settings do share some real info, visible only to you, of course. Maybe someone accessed that?" His explanation was flimsy, full of holes. I knew I was careful about my privacy settings. But he was so calm, so reasonable, it made me doubt myself again. Maybe I had overlooked something. Maybe I was just being paranoid. The profile picture incident intensified my paranoia. Every notification, every message made me jump. I started hearing things. Knocks at my door when I was streaming, the creak of floorboards in the hallway. I'd rushed to the peephole, but there was never anyone there. Just the empty hallway, the silence amplifying my fear. One evening, I was streaming a particularly intense quest. My focus was completely on the game, trying to navigate a treacherous dungeon, when my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered. "Busy Bee?" a voice said. It was Red Shock. My blood ran cold. "Don't worry," he said, his voice smooth and almost soothing. "I'm just making sure you're safe." The casualness of his tone was terrifying. He was checking up on me, not through the game, but directly, intruding into my real life. He was playing a game with me, a twisted, terrifying game, and I was starting to feel like I was losing. I told him, my voice trembling, "Don't ever do that again." He chuckled softly. "Just looking out for you, Busy Bee," he said. "You know I'd never let anything happen to you." His words were meant to be reassuring, but they sent a shiver of dread down my spine. It wasn't protection he was offering, it was possession. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was trapped in his game. His words, "I'd never let anything happen to you," echoed in my mind long after I ended the call. They weren't comforting, they were a threat. A promise. I felt like a fly caught in a spider's web, each movement only tightening the silken threads around me. Sleep offered no escape. I'd drift off, only to be jolted awake by nightmares. Redshock's face leering at me from the screen, his voice whispering my name in the darkness. Paranoia became my constant companion. I replayed every interaction with Redshock, every message, every seemingly innocent comment, searching for clues, for some indication of how far his obsession went. I even started analyzing past streams, scrutinizing the footage for anything I might have missed. And then, I saw it. During a recent stream when I was focused on a particularly challenging boss fight, the video feed had glitched. Just for a split second, the image flickered. And I saw something in the background of my room. A shadow, a fleeting glimpse of movement. It was gone in an instant, but it was enough. Enough to confirm my worst fears. He was watching me. Not just online, but in real life. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The game, the messages, the warnings, they were all part of his twisted game. He wasn't just a friend, he was a stalker, meticulously weaving his way into my life. That night, I decided to stream. I know it sounds crazy, streaming when I was so terrified, but I felt like I had to. I needed to document what was happening, to have some kind of record. And maybe, just maybe, someone would see something, notice something I'd missed. I started the stream, my hands shaking as I adjusted the webcam. I tried to act normal, to pretend everything was fine, but my fear was palpable. I could feel his eyes on me, even through the screen. As I played, I was hyper-vigilant, my senses on high alert. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle outside my window sent a jolt of fear through me. Then, it happened. The screen glitched again, just like before. And this time, I wasn't the only one who saw it. Several viewers in the chat mentioned it. "Did anyone else see that?" One person typed. "What was that in the background?" Another asked. My heart pounded in my chest. I knew what they'd seen. The shadow. The glimpse of movement. He was there, in my apartment, watching me. Suddenly I heard a noise behind me. A faint rustling sound. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Slowly I turned my head. And there he was. Standing in the doorway to my bedroom, partially hidden in the shadows. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew it was him. Redshock. His presence filled the room, a dark, menacing weight. I screamed, a raw, primal scream that echoed through my apartment. He didn't move, didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching me, a silent predator in the darkness. The scream seemed to snap him out of whatever trance he was in. He turned and ran, disappearing down the hallway. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type the numbers. "Police," I gasped, my voice trembling. I'm being stalked. He's in my house." The police arrived quickly. I told them everything, from the first unsettling messages to the figure in my doorway. They listened patiently, their faces grim. They told me they suspected stalking, that this was a serious situation. They gave me advice: change my locks, install security cameras, be careful who I trust. But they couldn't do much more than that. Not without concrete evidence. As the police left, I was left alone in my apartment, the silence amplifying my fear. I felt violated, exposed. He'd been in my home, in my sanctuary. He'd invaded my life, and I felt like I could never truly feel safe again. The flashing lights of the police car faded into the night, leaving me alone in the oppressive quiet of my apartment. The officer's words echoed in my head: "Stalking, serious situation, change your locks." They were just words. Words that couldn't erase the image of Redshock standing in my doorway, the chilling emptiness in his unseen face. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like my privacy had been irrevocably violated. My sanctuary had become a trap. Sleep was impossible. Every creak, every rustle sent me spiraling into fresh waves of terror. I imagined him lurking outside, watching, waiting. I spent the night huddled on my couch, clutching my phone, every nerve screaming. A week passed. 7 days of living in a state of constant dread. I barely left the apartment. I ordered groceries online, avoided looking out the windows, and jumped at every unexpected sound. The world outside felt hostile, contaminated. Even the familiar hum of my computer, usually a source of comfort, now felt threatening. I hadn't logged into Heartwire since the night he'd been in my apartment. The thought of going back online, of entering that digital space where he had first reached out to me, filled me with nausea. But I knew I had to. I had to see if he'd tried to contact me. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to sit at my computer. My hands trembled as I clicked the Heartwire icon. The loading screen felt agonizingly slow. When the game finally loaded, my heart pounded in my chest. My inbox was flooded with messages. Dozens of them, all from Redshock. My stomach churned. I scrolled through them, my eyes scanning the text. They started out innocently enough, casual messages, asking how I was, pretending nothing had happened. He talked about the game, about quests we'd planned, like we were still friends. Like he hadn't invaded my home, terrorized me. As I scrolled further down, the messages became more frequent, more insistent. He asked why I hadn't been online, why I wasn't streaming. His tone shifted from friendly to pleading, then to something darker, more desperate. "Busy Bee, where are you?" he wrote. "I've been worried about you. I miss you." Another message read, "Let's play together, just like old times." Then the messages took a turn. They became possessive, almost menacing. "I know you're there," he wrote. "I can feel you. You can't hide from me, Busy Bee. I told you I'd always be there for you." That last message sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't a comforting promise, it was a threat, a chilling reminder that he was still out there, watching, waiting. He wasn't just a stalker. He was something far more dangerous, something obsessive and deeply disturbed. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was far from over. He was playing a game, and I was trapped in it, a pawn in his twisted, terrifying fantasy. His message, "I told you I'd always be there for you," hung in the digital air, a chilling promise that made my blood run cold. I closed the message window, my hands shaking. I knew I couldn't just ignore him. He wouldn't let me. He'd proven that. I needed to understand. I needed to know who this person was, this Redshock who had invaded my life. I couldn't go to the police with just vague feelings of dread. I needed proof, something concrete. I confided in a friend, someone tech-savvy, someone I trusted. I told her everything. The messages, the figure in the doorway, the chilling phone call. She was horrified, but she didn't dismiss me. She believed me, and she offered to help. "We need to dig deeper," she said. "We need to find out who this guy really is." Together, we started investigating. We began with Redshock's online presence. We looked at his Heartwire profile, his forum posts, any other online accounts we could find. It was like trying to trace a ghost. He'd been careful. He'd used a fake name, a generic profile picture. There was nothing concrete, nothing that directly linked him to me. But as we dug deeper, we started to find inconsistencies. Small things, subtle clues that didn't quite add up. A mention of a specific location in one forum post, a reference to a local event in another. Individually, they were nothing. But together, they painted a picture of someone who was trying very hard to hide something. My friend was brilliant. She knew how to navigate the digital world, how to trace IP addresses, how to find hidden connections. Slowly, painstakingly, we started to piece together the puzzle. We discovered that Redshock's IP address traced back to a location not far from my apartment, much closer than I had initially feared. We found a social media account linked to the same IP address. The name on the account was different, but there was something familiar about the profile picture. The angle of the face, the way the person held themselves, it was him. It was Redshock. The social media account revealed more: his real name, his age, his interests. He was obsessed with online gaming, with virtual reality, with the idea of escaping into another world. And he was obsessed with me. There were posts about Busy Bee, about my streams, about things I'd said and done online. His obsession was documented, laid bare for us to see. We even found photos, pictures of him at local events, confirming the location clues we'd found. And then we found something truly chilling: photos of me. Candid shots, taken without my knowledge. Me walking down the street, me in the library, me in my own apartment, peering out the window. He'd been watching me all along, not just online, but in real life. He'd been stalking me for months, maybe even longer. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a terrifying picture. Redshock wasn't just some random online creep. He was someone who had meticulously planned this intrusion into my life. He'd used the game, used my trust to get close to me. He'd manipulated me, gaslighted me, and terrified me. And now, I knew who he was. I knew his real name. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. Knowing his real name, seeing his face in those stolen photos, it didn't bring me relief. It made things worse. It made him real. He wasn't just a faceless username anymore. He was a person. A dangerous, obsessive person who knew my secrets, who had invaded my life. I took the information we'd gathered to the police. This time, I had proof. The photos, the social media posts, the IP address tracing, they took it seriously. They opened a formal investigation, but they warned me. Stalking cases were difficult. Proving intent was hard. They couldn't guarantee anything. I didn't feel any safer. Knowing his name didn't diminish my fear, it amplified it. He knew I was on to him now. He knew I'd gone to the police. I was no longer just a target. I was a threat. I took every precaution I could think of. I changed my locks, installed security cameras, and got a restraining order. But it felt like putting a band-aid on a gaping wound. I knew he wouldn't stop. He was too far gone, too consumed by his obsession. Then he contacted me again, not through Heartwire, but directly. He found my phone number, I still don't know how, and he started texting me. At first, the messages were pleading, begging me to talk to him, telling me he was sorry. Then they turned angry, accusatory. He blamed me for everything, saying I'd betrayed him, that I didn't understand him. The texts escalated, becoming more frequent, more threatening. He described things he could see from his location, things only someone watching me could know. He was taunting me, playing his twisted game to the very end. One night, the text stopped. An unsettling silence descended. I knew it wasn't over. It was the calm before the storm. I was in my apartment, the security cameras my only companions. I was watching the live feed, every shadow, every flicker of movement making my heart race. Then, the feed from one of the cameras went black, the one covering my front door. My blood ran cold. I knew what it meant. He was here. Suddenly my phone rang. It was him. "Busy bee," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I told you I'd always be there for you." He was in the apartment. I could hear the faint creak of floorboards in the hallway. He was close. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911 again, but he'd disabled the landline. My cell service was spotty inside the apartment. I ran to the window and screamed for help. I don't know what happened next. Everything is a blur of fear and adrenaline. I remember him appearing in the doorway, his face finally visible, contorted with rage and obsession. I remember screaming, fighting, trying to escape. And then, everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed. The police were there, asking me questions. They told me they'd found me unconscious in my apartment. They'd arrested him. He was in custody. But even now, even after everything, I don't feel safe. The feeling of being watched hasn't gone away. I still see his face in my nightmares, hear his voice whispering my name. He's in jail, yes, but the fear remains. He's still out there, in a way. A part of him is still inside my head, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of the online world. A constant whisper that says, "I'll always be there." And that's the most terrifying thing of all.